students. So I will again continue with the chapter Albert Einstein at school. Albert was right, and when Yuri saw him the next time, he actually seemed troubled. By this time, Albert had given up, and he actually was expecting a nervous breakdown if things continued like this. This would surely make the doctor's work easier. Yuri conveyed to him that he had just found the doctor for him and he had an appointment the next evening. He gave him the address that was written in a piece of paper. Albert read the doctor's name, Ernst Well, and asked Yuri if he was a nerve specialist. Yuri told him that he was not exactly a neuro specialist and that he qualified as a doctor only last week, and that Albert could even be his first patient. Yuri mentioned that he had known him for a while and warned Albert not to lie to him because the doctor was, after all, not a fool. Yuri asked him to be honest and not pretend to have nervous issues. He immediately mentioned that it was not also possible because Albert was the world's worst liar. That is, Albert was very honest. He spent the next day thinking about all he was going to say to the doctor. He thought so much that he feared he would actually get a nervous breakdown. Albert went to see the doctor and told him that he really did not have the right choice of words to describe his miserable situation. The friendly doctor comforted him and told him that Yuri had already done it for him. That is, Yuri had already narrated everything about Albert to him. It turned out that Yuri had told Dr. Well the entire truth and how Albert wanted the doctor to think he had a nervous breakdown because of the school. Albert expressed his displeasure with Dr. Well knowing the entire truth because he felt that the doctor would not help him now. As a result, he would have to go back to school. Again, the doctor comforted him by saying that his situation was well understood, even when he had not told anything about it. Albert was surprised with the doctor's reply and asked him how he got to know all about Albert. The doctor replied very professionally that if Albert was not really close to a nervous breakdown, he wouldn't be really seeing him. He then inquired about Albert's plans once he gets out of the school. Albert told him that his plan was to live with his parents in Milan, Italy, where he would join an Italian college. The doctor replied that it was not possible without a diploma. Albert believed that his mathematics teacher would provide him with a reference good enough to get admission in a college. Albert claimed to have learned all about mathematics that is taught in a school and some more of it as well. The doctor was still not convinced if he would succeed with his idea of getting admission in any college. But he was definitely convinced about the fact that Albert was not doing much good to himself or anyone else by going to school. Thus, he wanted to know how long Albert wanted to stay away from school. Albert suggested a time period of 6 months. Dr. Well told him that he understood the situation so well because he had just stopped being a student. The doctor also knew what were the drawbacks in the education system. Even he had to face a number of problems as a student. He had to struggle, rather overcome those situations. In fact, we get to understand that the education system that existed during those days required a change. The doctor handed him the medical certificate and wished him best of luck. He even refused to take fees from him. He requested him to invite Yuri someday for a meal, as Yuri was a good friend of both Albert and the doctor. Though Albert had no money, he was filled with joy and he took Yuri out for supper. On seeing the certificate, Yuri assured him that 6 months was quite a long time, for in case things went wrong, Albert could come back to finish his school diploma. Albert reassured Yuri that this was not going to happen because he would never come back to that place or school. Albert wanted to bring everything to an end in school. He conveyed his idea of taking the certificate to the head of school the very next day. But Yuri reminded him to collect the reference letter first from the mathematics teacher before he presented the certificate to the head teacher. Mr. Koch, the mathematics teacher, gave Albert the reference he wanted. The teacher even went to the extent of saying that Albert could soon teach him, to which Albert replied that he was saying too much, probably out of respect for his teacher. But the teacher admitted that this was the truth. Albert was so good at mathematics that, according to Mr. Koch, he could readily pursue higher studies with mathematics as his subject. The teacher expressed his displeasure about Albert leaving But again he knew Albert was wasting his time there. Albert instantly corrected him by saying that Mr. Koch's class was the only class where he was not wasting his time. Albert did not tell him anything about leaving, but Mr. Koch could identify it long before Albert realized himself. Albert was puzzled to hear his words. What did the teacher mean? But soon he got his reply. To his surprise, he was called into the head's room. Although he was not aware of the reason and he was himself going to make an appointment, but he was happy that it saved him the trouble of waiting for 1 or 2 hours to meet him. Albert did not put much thought into why he was called into the office, but somehow he knew it was to punish him for his poor performance and lack of interest in studies. It could not be anything good. But now he was done with all of it. To his utmost surprise, Einstein was told that he was not going to be punished this time. The headmaster expressed that he was done with all his work. It was terrible. He was not prepared to have him any longer in school. He ordered him to leave school. After hearing this, Albert asked the head teacher if he was expelled. The head teacher was serious. He replied that Albert could think of it the way he wished. He suggested him to leave school on his own instead of being expelled, as it would be a very simple thing to do so. Albert wanted to know the crime he committed, for which the teacher asked him to leave school. The head teacher explained how his presence was creating trouble for teachers to give lessons to other students and how no serious work could be done before his presence. He was always in constant rebellion and refused to learn. While standing there, Albert felt the certificate was burning a hole in his pocket, which means that the pain and effort that it took to get the certificate had all gone a waste, as the certificate was rendered useless now. He even had spent money to feed Yuri with a meal. Regardless, Albert expressed that he was anyway going to leave, to which the teacher replied that at least for the first time, they both agreed on something. At that moment, Albert was being driven by his desire to tell the head teacher the truth and what he thought of the school. But somehow he managed to resist it, because at last his wish was fulfilled. He walked straight out of the school with his head held high, ignoring the head teacher's instruction to shut the door behind. He did not even look back at the place where he had spent the most terrible years of his life. He had no real friends or close acquaintances. He could not think of anyone he wanted to say goodbye to. You all know, students, that Yuri was his only friend in Munich. So he met him before leaving the place, which he hated so much as he hated his school. Yuri wished him good luck and hoped he would be happy in the country he was going to. Elsa was also back in Berlin with her family, and thus there was no one else with whom Albert could meet before leaving the place. So here the story comes to an end. That's all. Thank you and have a nice day.